All right, welcome everyone to the first Thursday of the month, where we have the great opportunity to have thought leaders and experts in the home services industry speak to us about all the things they've learned. And in this case, we've got a rock star of a person on the call or on our show with us. I'll do a quick introduction. The Home Services Summit is all about getting you good content and information around how to grow your home service franchise company. My name is Scott Abbott. I'm one of the co-founders of 5 Star Painting and CEO of 5 Star Franchising. And our sister company, ProNexis, is a sponsor of this series. The mission at ProNexis is to transform the customer experience in the home services industry through voice, chat, text, and instant booking. So quick format, if you haven't been on the show before, I will go ahead and do an interview here with Brandon and get into all that he's learned and all he can teach us. And at the very end, we'll take about 15 minutes to let you guys ask any questions you'd like. I'll just call them from the audience. You'll notice in the chat on the top right-hand section there, you can put any question you like in here at any time, but around 45 minutes into the hour, I will pull from those and let Brandon share his wisdom. So with that, let me go ahead and do a quick intro on Brandon. Brandon joined Princeton in 2021 and works closely with the Princeton investment team to evaluate acquisition opportunities and enhance portfolio companies' franchise development efforts. Brandon most recently served as the Senior Vice President of Development at Neighborly and the world's largest home services franchisor, where he had led a team of up to 130 franchise development members for their 19 domestic franchisor brands, which comprise over 4,800 franchisees. Brandon is passionate about helping growth companies and changing people's lives through franchising. His favorite quote is at the bottom of all of his emails is, the two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. Samuel Langhorne Clemens, a.k.a. Mark Twain. Maybe just before we get into, Brandon, your story, thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate having you here. Why is that your favorite quote? And maybe just you got to tell us where that came from and what does that mean to you?
Yeah, so I had a couple mentors way early on in my career. One of them being a man named Ross Perot, who ran for president. And Ross had the same quote at the bottom of all of his emails. And he said, Brandon, when you realize that your why is greater than you, right? This is long before the power of why. This is long before all the cool buzz about finding your why. So when you realize that it's bigger than you, life is bigger than you. It's about your generations and other people's generations. And when you realize that, everything's going to shift. You're born for such a time as this, but your actions and attitudes in your time actually affect what's next.
So can I ask, have you discovered your why? Have you discovered what you were born here to do? And when did that happen? And what did it mean to you?
Yeah, so going through that mentor time for sure. I have 3 sons, Hunter, Hudson, and Hagen, 10, 8, and 4. And those guys are a huge part of my why, right? I mean, you have 5 children, so you know that better than I do, grandchildren.
Oh yeah.
And so that's a huge thing is to leave it better than you found it. I think that's a big piece, right? There's a faith element to it as well, but it's also just pouring onto the next generation and helping other people. When you help other people, you end up helping yourself, right? When you give more, you get more. That's the way life works.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons why I love franchising, as you mentioned and I read in your bio, right? It's the power of franchising is giving to people the ability to create something for themselves and a quality of life that people deserve. And to be the vehicle for that is very rewarding, especially when you see it work. And so I appreciate you sharing that. So let's just get into, what got you into franchising? Where were you before franchising? And obviously it's been a number of years since you've been in it. Maybe what do you see as if you look at let me just start with that. What got you into franchising and your background before franchising?
Yeah. So prior to franchising, I was head of wealth management for the Southwest region of Wells Fargo. So I was helping high net worth individuals kind of discover what to do with their wealth. I was part of a thing called the Abbott Downing Association, which was 100 million or more in assets. Would kind of come through my team and my office, and we would walk through how do you build trust and how do you build for the next generation. And my wife Kristen and I started having our boys, Hunter and who'll be 11 soon. And her father had some connections at that time at the Dwyer Group, and which is now Neighborly. And I went through a conversation in March of 2010 is when I started having the conversations with a man named Robert Tunmeyer, which a lot of folks know in this industry.
Mm-hmm.
Robert's been a good friend and a mentor. And I didn't actually start until 2011 at Neighborly, but Robert stuck with me for that whole year. He and Mike Hawkins kind of calling, checking in. So Kristen and I had the boys, and we really felt like we were supposed to kind of leave the banking space, and I really called into Waco and called into franchising. Prior to all that, my family actually are all in the trades. So my family, I come from plumbers, electricians, HVAC folks, and my dad had his own business and had to file bankruptcy because he had no systems. So I remember sitting and talking with Robert and with Mike, and Robert and Mike both saying, your story is the story that we help, so that dads don't have to sit around the table and tell their sons we're filing for bankruptcy. So I walked into Neighborly with the background, right? I've got the sheet metal scars to prove it. I've crawled through insulation and attics, and I've done it all. I've changed balances and shocked myself, and I've been knee deep in the good stuff. So yeah, that was a big piece. And so it was just kind of this natural immersion, a natural fit.
So Robert Tunmeyer, not only does he sell franchises, but he also sells people to get into franchising on the sell side, right?
That's exactly
He's always selling something. Robert is definitely very talented at that. And so maybe just talk about, you joined Neighborly. What year did you join? And then, what did you start out doing at Neighborly, or at the time Dwyer Group? You obviously moved up over the years. Kind of walk us through that part of your career.
Yeah, so I remember sitting in Robert's office, kind of going through the interview, and Robert said, "Where do you see yourself in 10 years?" And I said, "Well, your chair looks pretty comfortable. I think that's the spot for me." And of course, Robert kind of looked at me and smirked like, "Yeah, right." But I know that's the answer that Robert would have given Don Dwyer years before me. And so I started out as a franchise developer, kind of bottom of the rung with AirServe, conversion sales, HVAC background, and then worked my way up. That was in 2011. In August of 2011 is when we had Hunter, and then I started in October of 2011. So we had a newborn baby, kind of quitting a really successful career, moving to Waco, and then just kind of promoted through vice president, and then eventually senior vice president, and eventually I ended my career when Robert retired, doing Robert's job. So actually, it all came to fruition, being in Robert's chair. So I had a lot of fun and great mentor, and learned a lot from him.
Yeah, I mean it's a great success story, right? And over those years, how many you were a part of, or you yourself sold? How many units were you involved in while you were at Neighborly or Dwyer Group selling?
Yeah, personal sales and leadership, right? The whole time, it's well over 2,500. I don't have the exact number, but I know it's well over 2,500.
Yeah, for those that are listening, right? Many of our listeners here have got like 5, 10, 15, or 20 franchises. And they were probably looking at your chair thinking, I want to have Brennan's chair too. Yeah. I'd love to be in a position one day where I moved 2,500 locations and all the lives of those who have been changed by now being their own owner. I like how you mentioned that you came from the trades and you saw what happens when a business owner operates a business without the systems and processes that are needed to be really successful and scale it up. I don't know if you know this or not, but I actually was an electrician for about a year and a half, and plumber, and I was active in the trades as well before committing to franchising painting. So you mentioned it in your conversation at the very beginning there. You did AirServe and you were involved in conversions. That's a topic I think for a lot of home service companies. They wonder about whether or not are conversion sales for them. I know we experimented with it at Visor Painting, had some wins and some not so great wins in that process. Maybe talk to us about how many of those sales were part of, what we would call a conversion sale, and what makes that different than selling to someone that's, looking to buy, a five-star painting location that's not a conversion.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say at least 500 of those, so call it 20%, were conversions across multiple brands, not just AirServe, across Mr. Rooter, Mr. Electric, Grounds Guys, right? Across several brands. It was about 20% in my time there were conversions. There were some times where it's more or less, but about 500. And to your question, right, the psychology of that sale is completely different than a biz op or someone who's coming in and just kind of starting a business. One, there's licensing requirements, there's other things that have to be involved. But typically, when you're taking someone and you're asking them to convert their existing business into a franchise, you have to, in a very nice way, right? You have to do a couple things. One, you have to help them understand their why. You have to sometimes remind them, why did you get into this business to begin with? You have to also tell them that you have an ugly baby, right? Nobody likes to be told that they have an ugly baby, but you have to tell them, look, your baby is ugly. And you ask them the questions, right? Like, when's the last time you took a vacation? Why did you get involved in this? Why not just go back and be a technician? You're going to have more free time. And just literally asking the questions, when I first started, I got it with Mike and Robert. Both said, you have to show a mirror in front of these folks, which goes back to another quote that I've said throughout my career many, many times, is when you realize the person staring back at you in the mirror is both your problem and your solution, your whole world will change. When you realize that, everything shifts. So you shine the mirror back on somebody who really and truly, they're in the thick of it, but they're twice or three times removed from the chaos, right? It's like doing triage. It's like being in an emergency room and helping somebody see that everything you've got going on in your world is not normal. And then helping them unpack that. So really walking them back through not only their why, but what is it they want to achieve. So that's a big piece to it.
Can you hear me okay, Brian? I think my internet wasn't great there for a minute, but I know what you were saying was really valuable.
Sure.
I apologize, guys. I'm actually not in the office. I'm actually with the family at spring break, and so I'm working off of Wi-Fi. So on some of the brands you were working with clearly were a better fit for conversions versus others. I'd love for you to maybe just dive into that a bit more. Like, which of the brands did you find at Neighborly were the ones that you developed a conversion program for? Which of the brands you say, Scott, it just doesn't make any sense. You should not ever take that to a conversion model.
Yeah, so your trades brands, right, that require licensing, that require a master or require at least a GC, a general contractor's license for those listening in, right? 5-Star Painting is one where we actually had to do some conversion selling there as well. Not a whole lot, but with the subcontractor model, that's a little different, right? You're subbing the work out, so you don't necessarily have to be. But I think the key is any business can be a conversion sale, right? It's not subject to this or only this, right? But you have to have the boundaries and have to have the understanding. So you really have to hone in on your personas. Like, who are you going after, right? Like, who's your target customer? And maybe your target customer is not a conversion sale, but like your trades brands, right? Your Mr. Electric, your Mr. Rooter, your Air Serves, your Grounds guys, right? Your trades brands where there's already going to be existing business. Those are going to be places. Glass Doctor, right? Those are some businesses that already have folks in a business, or your Glass Doctor is a great example, having folks that are maybe in a body shop that are in a business similar, and so you have some diversification. Rainbow, same thing. Yeah. So it just really depends on the brand.
So clearly, we tinkered with this as well at 5-Star Painting, right? And we've thought about it with some of the brands we have in 5-Star Franchising. Clearly, there's this. The advantage is you get to step into a business that has existing sales, right? And so your royalties start from ground one. You get past many times the licensing requirements, which can slow down some openings in some markets. But there's some downside to this, right? Like as you mentioned, if you're going to someone to have them buy or convert their business, it's because their current business is hitting a ceiling. They're not getting past that. And sometimes that ceiling is actually, as you mentioned, in the mirror. It has nothing to do with anything else other than the fact it's them.
Right.
Did you find that in general, as you sell the franchise, that with let's say Mr. Reuter, did a Mr. Reuter franchise conversion typically outperform an executive sale? Like, would you want one over the other? Is there one that's preferred over the other? And like, what's the downside, I guess, to conversion sales?
Yeah, that's great. I think, I go back to the treadmill model, right? So and I've said this 100 times over with folks on call with candidate is, Scott, if you came to me and said, Brandon, I want to lose 20 pounds. And I say, Scott, I've got the best treadmill possible. Here's all the water you got to drink. Here's the food plan you got to have. Here's how much sleep you got to get. Here's how long you got to be on this treadmill. Here's how the speed of that treadmill. Here's all the things that you got to do. Who still has to get on the treadmill? You do.
Mm-hmm.
I can give you a Tesla, but if you park it in the garage, good luck. You're going to do nothing with it.
Mm-hmm.
So more often than not, and this is something that, I learned over my career, more often than not, it's the individual that really makes the difference. And just a clarifier, inside of conversion sales, sometimes you're bringing on a candidate who's already a very successful, from a financial standpoint, really, really successful entrepreneur, operator, multi-million dollars worth of business, doing a lot of business. But the question is, what's going to happen to the next generation when you retire? Right? So there's also those places of when you go, what's going to happen to your business? Because you're the system right now. So I think that's the key, is finding individuals that will be successful. It doesn't matter if they're a millionaire, if they've done successful in corporate America, it's always what's inside someone. And doing your profiling and making sure that you're having conversations along the way and making sure that your process is geared towards bringing the right folks in. That's a big one. On the conversion sale, what you'll see is folks will see instant results from a relief standpoint, right? Not necessarily from the business standpoint, but it's a relief that they have business to integrate, and they've got things and systems and processes that now they can integrate to their team. It's always that Greg Nathan, right? The stages of a franchisee, right? You go from fee to glee to fear to me to right, we, all those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's that same process, that ebb and flow inside of a biz op or a conversion. It's easier sometimes if you have the right brand president, if you have the right team, that they get those folks focused back. I see Mary Kay Liston on here. Mary Kay Liston is a woman that I think so highly of for a multitude of reasons, her and Mark both. But they were so great at getting inside of a franchisee's mind and space and saying, hey, why did we do this to begin with? And then really helping them see you're fighting the system, right? It's franchisees, specifically in conversions and in biz ops, that 2-3 year mark. It's like, have you ever seen a mom trying to silence a baby that's crying, right? And they're shushing them, right? Shush, shush, shush. And then finally they fall asleep and everybody's good. But there's that chaos for a little while. Right? And then if you have the right temperament to say, hey, look, we're going to get through this. The output is so much greater than you can imagine. So
I'm gonna brand something called the franchisee soother.
Yeah.
To give to every franchisor. If only it was that easy. So it sounds like you're an advocate of conversion models, and it sounds like what ultimately drives performance is the very same thing that drives performance for any franchise sales. It's really the candidate. Did you do any kind of screening? Like, in other words, did you ever say no to conversion? Like, this guy's not, or girl is not going to work, and we got to move on because they simply will not follow systems. And how did you do that?
So one of the things my team is really will tell you, anyone who ever worked for me, like way early on, and I saw this with Robert and Mike too, but there's always this place of, look, they're not a franchisee till they're a franchisee. I have literally sent candidates home that are in their training week. Like, walked in, brand president coming to my office going, hey, Brandon, this person is just being pretty out there for us. So going in and having a conversation, hey, are you sure you really want to do this? You don't. Well, here's a plane ticket. Go ahead and go home. Right? This is a long-term thing. And when your team sees that, when they see that, wow, my senior vice president is willing to send someone home who's already signed their franchise agreement, it changes the scope. It changes the game tremendously. Now they're vetting differently on the front end. You're not just selling units to sell units. That's the difference with conversions. That's the difference with finding the right people. Partnering with a call center was one of the biggest things in a conversion space, right? Like taking a group of people that really and truly can get those lists, can get those folks, similar to like a ProNexis, right? Getting those lists and really honing in on here's who we're looking for, and just calling through the list and finding your candidates, knowing who to call, when to call, and then starting the process. Not everyone who comes through the process is going to be a franchisee. It's 1 in 100. It's been that. We've talked about it forever. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more. I've seen it 1 in 60. I've seen it 1 in 200, right? But that barometer that has been around franchising forever, I'm not trying to get 99 yeses. I'm trying to get one at a time. And I think that's the key.
So you hit something that's important, and that is some numbers for those that are listening that would want to, I think they all want to know like what to expect and some benchmarks. First of all, you mentioned that, you leverage an outsourced call center to do outbound calling on lists. Where did you buy your lists? How did you get those to figure out like who to be calling in conversion?
Yeah. So it's a couple things. We had an internal lead development team, and then we did some external there toward the end. To your point, right? You're calling that USA Today list. You're calling that Murphy's list. You're getting those Manta lists, right? It's different places to get the list, right? If you find a top-notch call center, they already have it integrated into their system. But there's tons of different lists. It just depends on the industry specific you're looking for. Partner with an expert. I think we did that wrong for a while. We just tried to buy random lists here and there, but partner with an expert. And this isn't a plug, right? But just partner with an expert that already knows how to do it. I think you go further with people who've already been there.
Yeah. And so you mentioned that, sometimes you're selling 1 in 60, sometimes you're selling 1 in 200, but the reality is it's somewhere between 60 and 200 candidates you're talking to get to the point where you actually get one person to a sale, right? So I know it's a pretty wide range, but it's not 1 in 1,000, and it's not 1 in 20. You're somewhere in that 60 to 200. I think that's pretty valuable. Did you find that, how much time did you spend perfecting that pitch for the call center to be using to get someone on the, interested in a conversation? Did those people just tee up appointments for your franchise sales team, and then they took it from there, and it was just a, bare minimum qualification, like, oh, you have a plumbing business, therefore you should consider it? Or kind of talk us through how that.
So one caveat, just a couple things. That's across all lead sources. 1 in 60 to 1 in 200. That's across all lead sources. Some lead sources are going to be more in tune. Like you get in your brokers and whatnot, right? We utilize brokers. I had a percentage, right? A very specific percentage that I stuck with on brokers versus non, so that my franchise development department was actually a multi-million-dollar EBITDA producer. Like, let me say that again. Franchise development was actually a multi-million-dollar EBITDA producer. That's not the case in most franchise spaces, right? So yes, circling back, our teams would work really diligently with call centers, right? We did use ProNexis, obviously. I'm gonna say that one. We did use ProNexis, and we would work with the team. We'd work with Ben, and we'd say, hey, look, here's the criteria for sending this person over. We'd work with our internal team. Here's the criteria for sending this person over. And it's a constant, right? It's a constant. Here's what creates a quality candidate. Here's the 8 things they have to have. This doesn't change. Here's the 5 things they have to have. This doesn't change, right? Are they willing? Do they have the money? They're not a felon, right? I mean, we did background checks and credit checks. Like there's those questions for each brand. You have to make sure that your qualifications are specific, right? So it's that SMART. Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, right? We go back through the thing. Same.
Okay. Did you, as you got these candidates on the phone and you started bringing them into the process, did you ever do profiling on them, like personality tests or anything like that on a candidate before they join? Is that part of the process you guys use?
Yeah. So at Neighborly, obviously, when we would bring brands in, some of them would use their own profiling, or they'd have their own profiling system, and we did disc profiling. For the time I was there, we actually would train our sales team on disc profiling. We've tried Navigator, we've tried Zoracle, we've tried them all. And I think the one that really and truly hones in on what is this person's temperament, right? So it's the 3 L's. I would tell folks, the reason we profile you is for the 3 L's. I want to know, how do you lead people? How do you learn? And how do you love on those around you, or how do you serve people? Because in business, you're going to have to do those three things constantly. You're going to have to learn, you're going to have to lead, and you're going to have to love on your people. This profiling tells me that about you. And yes, there are times where a profile would come through and we go, oh, man, hey, Mr. Candidate, Miss Candidate, are you sure you want to be a business owner? Are you really sure? Your profile tells us this. So yeah, those are hard, right? And you have especially when it's, let's just use the raw metrics, 1 in 100. I have a franchise developer, and this is where I gained a lot of trust with my brand presidents. I had a franchise developer who's worked tirelessly on this candidate, and they finally got to a yes, and now they have to go through an approval process with Brandon. Brandon sees their profile or sees their financials and says, sorry, come back later. Those are hard. Like, man, I've been working this candidate forever. Well, you've been working the wrong candidate forever. Let me help you.
I think anyone on this call has been there at some point where they've said yes to the wrong person, and they knew it. They knew it. They shouldn't have done it. They brought them in, and I've been there, and I've regretted it afterwards. And inevitably, it gives you. And it's so hard, especially at those early days in any franchise system, where that $40,000 and nowadays it's $60,000. Is kind of what you need to keep the business going, right? But we've all
I would let's kind of shift my teams this one little phrase just to kick this again. If you're asking your brand presidents to say yes to the wrong candidates, they're going to start saying no to the right ones. So keep that in mind. If you're asking your brand presidents over and over to say yes to the wrong candidates, they're going to say no to the right ones, because they're so gun shy that you're not following the process.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit into executive sales, and more importantly, I think how you as a leader built people around you in the franchise development role itself, right? So if you were to look at, I asked this question backstage with you earlier, if you were to look at the quality of leads versus the quality of the franchise development person, right? Like if you're a brand new franchise system or an early stage franchise system, should they be focusing on finding that killer franchise development person first, or they need to get killer leads so they can get to those amazing, franchise development people?
Yeah, it's chicken or egg, right? Like, which one's first?
I know.
So like I said to you backstage, it's yes and, right? So you've got to have quality leads so that your quality franchise developers don't get frustrated and go to your competitor. Let's just be clear. You have to have quality franchisee developers or franchise developers to work the not so quality leads. So it's yes and, right? I would always look at, am I getting at least 150 leads per month before I added another franchise developer onto a brand, right? A lot of times you can get away more production out of one developer than you can out of 6, right? I want to use Mr. Appliance as an example. Mr. Appliance, when I took over as the VP, and I remember going back and forth with Robert on this one, we had 5 franchise developers and we're selling like 18 units a year. And I said, Robert, if you'll let me get this down to 3 guys, 3 rock stars, and Robert had trust in me, right? And I think we were both kind of grinning back and forth of one of us is going to be able to say, I told you so, right? But we ended up selling 54 units with 3. And when I say units, let me clarify this with Neighborly. When I say units, it's bodies, right? It's not multi-packs, triples, right? 2, 3 packs. I'm saying bodies. Like when I say 2,500 franchisees I've been a part of. So that's a big piece. So just a tidbit there. I think getting those sources, and you have to use all sources. You have to use your portals. You have to use your brokers. You have to use your lead list and your organics. You have to make sure your website's good. You have to make sure your search engine optimization's good, your pay-per-clicks. So getting those leads in, you know this personally, Scott, from a mutual acquaintance, that I've hired solid rock star rookies of the year that were my waiter at a restaurant, because I saw something in that person that I can teach, train, and coach. You have the characteristics I'm looking for to sell.
Let's jump into that then for a moment, because everyone, it's the lifeblood of this business, right? You need to be able to attract not only good franchise development people and good executives on your management team, but you have to attract great franchisees. They make up the whole franchise system. I've been to conventions with ProNexis clients where you attend and you see the entire room full of franchisees, and they're high caliber people. They're amazing, and you can tell this is the kind of place I would want to be, right? And I've been in the opposite environments where the wrong people are being brought in the room, and the annual convention is just really not that great because of that energy that's there. And so you definitely want to make sure you're attracting great people. What is it you look for in a franchise sales executive? Like, what are the characteristics you're looking for, and how do you find those diamonds in the rough? In this case, where it's a waiter, or maybe it's quite obvious because it's the
that's great. So there's a couple things, right? When I started at Neighborly, the turnover rate for us was about 300% in franchise development. When I left, it was about 12%. Right? We instituted some changes and some shifts, brought in the Who process, right? The book by G.H. Smart called The Who and How Do You Interview. That unbelievable, right? And spending time, and when you really boil down the cost to train all those bodies and then let them go 6 months later, it's astronomical. But one of the things that I will preface with is typically if I saw someone's resume come across and they already had franchise sales experience or background, I was really specific on the questions I asked. I wanted to know about their process. I wanted to know, are you fixing to bring a whole bunch of bad habits into my process? Because there's a way that we do this, and it's this process. If you follow this process, you will be ridiculously successful. If you try to bring your process into this process, you will be ridiculously frustrated. Why? Because this is how it works in home service franchise sales. So I looked for folks who were passionate, folks who I knew that no matter what, they would have a smile on their face and they would be able to celebrate and have joy in the hard stuff, right? Be able to just kind of press through, and no matter what happened, right? The gentleman that I mentioned that was my waiter, like everything went wrong in that meal, right? Our food wasn't correct, the steak wasn't right, the bottle of wine we ordered wasn't correct, the salad was wrong, like everything was wrong. But it was the way that he handled it, the way that he handled not only me, but my wife at the time on our date night. My wife, not at the time, my wife, still my wife. Up to 5 minutes ago, unless that's changed. My wife, Kristen, was something I went, hey, this guy's going to be great on the phone. This guy's going to be great. And I continued to have a conversation, and I talked to him, and I asked him, hey, would you come in? And I said, by the way, if you're willing, like, I want to start you out to get your feet wet. I want you to be a lead developer. I want you to be the cold caller and see if this is going to be for you. And he did it, and he was a rock star there, and he promoted up to the next level. And that's a different jump, right? That's a different step. So I always look for folks that were just passionate. There's so many stories at Neighborly specifically, but my time in banking too. But guys who, if they knew their why, right? There was a gentleman that came in and is one of the most successful folks at Neighborly to this day. He was in the oil field, and he came home. He was gone 300 days, a year, kind of did some oil sales when he was in the oil field. And when he got home, his little daughter didn't recognize him. So he said, I got to do something different. I have to absolutely do something different. I went to Robert, I went to the team, and I said, this man will do whatever we ask him to do. This man has a why that is bigger than all of yours. His daughter didn't recognize him. And truly, he had some other characteristics in there as well. But still, guy breaks records because his why is crystal clear. It's crystal clear. I don't want to go back to the life where my family doesn't recognize me. I would tell my teams all the time, I want you to be more famous at home than you are in franchising. I want you to be a better person by working for me. I don't want you to just be a great salesperson. We'll work on things that are going to actually change your life, change your marriage, change how you father if you want, change how you're a mother if you want. But because it all connects. You can't separate it. It all connects.
I couldn't agree more. We're going to spend some more time on this and a little bit in a few minutes here, because I think this is it's not about segmenting and putting our lives into buckets and say, well, I've got this, my life in my faith or church, and I got my life with my family, and I'm in my society, and then my work, and we just put them into different buckets, and we try to manage them all differently. And I think I've tried doing that, and it's not doesn't work really well. I mean, ultimately, we need to find ways to integrate effectively who we are, because there's only so much time available, right? And there's lots of ways to do that, which we can go over here in a few minutes. But I want to just jump back to something you mentioned earlier, and that is this waiter that was working with you. You hired him first as a lead qualifier, and then so maybe just talk through it with us. What does the structure look like that you had? Did you have lead people and franchise sales people, and then in the franchise sales people, you have VPs of franchise sales, and you're like, kind of walk us through what does that look like when you're building an organization like you built?
Yeah, so there's different shifts, right? You have to plan for the end game, right? Start with the end in mind. That's Stephen Covey. And I think, with Neighborly for a long time, we were built perfectly for like 6 brands. And then we had to come together and evolve and change. And Robert and I would sit down and do that. And then when Robert retired, I had to sit down and come up with a whole nother structure. And I'd share it with Mary Thompson, the COO at the time. And I'd share it with other departments on, hey, we can actually put the groups in pods and build this thing out better if we do it correctly. Anyways, you're going to constantly be changing as your growth trajectory goes up, right? But you had lead developers, lead qualifiers. You would have a team of them, and they have teams inside of that, right? That were responsible for conversion brands or BizOp brands or calling portals and setting leads, or a LinkedIn team. And then you have your franchise developers, your sales professionals that are day to day. And then the brands would have either a VP, a selling VP, someone who's kind of that player coach, or you'd have a VP of a couple brands. And then they would roll up to senior vice president, myself, and or chief development officer, which is Robert Tunmeyer. And so then we realized, wow, we actually need another layer because there's so many here. And so I actually went to Salesforce and saw Salesforce's layout. And so I think that's the other thing is inside of franchising, we get so focused at thinking that the only way to do business is the way that franchisors do it. Well, the beautiful thing about Neighborly is we were constantly breaking barriers. So I started looking outside of the scope, going, well, who's bigger and badder? What sales organization is bigger than this? And then bringing it in and saying, actually, we need groups. So you need a group VP that answers into an SVP. The VPs roll up. And so hopefully that answers that. But that's kind of how the hierarchy. And then you had administrative assistants. You had your own contract administration team inside of the group. So yeah.
This is valuable stuff. I think on the lead gen piece and the lead handling piece, I want to just dig in that a little bit. So the people who are calling, lead from FranchiseGator or any of the portals out there, are they just dropping appointments onto the calendar of a franchise sales executive? And is that the handoff officially, or do they actually, are they texting those candidates to make sure they show up to the meeting, or kind of how's that?
Yeah, it's a mixture, right? So it depends there's preferences inside of each team. So I would work really closely with the VPs. My VP for the grounds guys and Mosquito Joe worked very differently than my VP for Mr. Appliance. The Mr. Appliance VP wanted contact right away, get them on my calendar today if you can. I want to text them. The VP grounds guys was more methodical and would say, hey, look, you know what? I don't want us to seem like we're just waiting on a phone call. So look at my calendar, and no, actually he's available next Tuesday at 2 or Thursday at 1. His calendar could be wide open, but Tuesday at 2 or Thursday at 1. The candidate's mind is shifting, right?
Right.
So there's all those little psychological nuggets along the way, but the qualifier would work with the VPs of the brand, work with the team, and say, hey, how do you want this best to work with you? Specifically in conversion sales, they've already spent 15 minutes they didn't have with you. And so you have to schedule it out. You have to say, okay, Brandon's calendar is available at 3. What does your calendar look like? And it's a little more fluid. Well, I'm not available until whatever time. So,
this idea called the setter model, right? It's actually quite commonly used in a lot of door-to-door sales. My son actually is going to be selling solar in Texas. He knocked on your door, Brandon, and for a company, and he was going through with me how he would start that model and knock doors, set appointments for people who are the closers. If you get enough of those appointments set for the closers. You become a closer, then you're a setter and a closer, and it's a similar kind of model here. I do think that as you think about, and as anyone on this call thinks about their own franchise development team, if you've got top-notch closers, people who know how to close deals, do you really want them calling 20 people and dialing for dollars when really they're the best at the conversation level, where they're taking an hour with someone, walking them through, changing their life and owning their own business? So I think that is an important element to aspire to at some point, where your franchise sales team is divided into two categories. One is the setter and one's the closer. So I think that's some great advice there. Some metrics maybe for us, Brandon, what do you expect? And I know, just to come back to this, because some people, once again, when they talk about franchise sales, they'll think about territory sold versus people sold. The way that they do it at Neighborly is it's people. So when we talk about 2,500 units, it's not 2,500 units actually for many people. It's like probably 5,000 units, because a number of territories people are buying. But how many people or bodies should one franchise sales executive sell a year?
That's great. If they're a rookie and they're brand new, I would say 8 to 10 is the number that I've said for quite a while. 8 to 10 bodies, right? That could be 16 to 20 units, or if they're doing 3-packs, it could be more. 8 to 10 bodies is what I would lead and manage to. That's 2 a quarter, right? That's either one every other month. They're getting acclimated, and then your veterans should be doing 12 to 16 bodies, really and truly. That's standard in the process that I ran. That's not standard across, right? If you go to a franchise development leadership conference in Buckhead, even on this call, that's not standard, right? Eight is kind of a norm for folks. But and for a long time, that was kind of the standard and the norm at Neighborly too. And we shifted the process. Robert had a great idea to bring in a system, and then we worked and tweaked that system along the way.
So it's important to highlight that again. If you're a franchise sales executive in your business, should be moving at least one body, or one person should be buying a business a month on average or better. So that's good feedback. Maybe I want to get into your faith and how you pull it into your business here in 1 minute. And just to remind people that we're coming close to the point where I'll be pulling any questions you may have for Brandon. Feel free in the chat to go ahead and post this in there, and I'll call on your questions here for Brandon to answer. But looks like we got a shout out from Austin Meek. He said, I directly reported to Brandon during our time at Neighborly. He has a platitude for everything. They're all applicable and memorable. It's aspirational and inspirational. Thanks, Austin. I'm sure Brandon would like to love hearing that. Kevin Bryant said, spot on with your take on conversions. And Mary Kay, of course, said hello. Brandon, maybe talk to us about how you use an item 19 in franchise development and franchise sales. I mean, we talked backstage. You mentioned to me that in some cases, you actually didn't even have an item 19, or you removed an item 19 from your FDDs. And for some of you, you're probably thinking, what? How's that even possible? How could you sell franchises without one? Well, it can be done. So maybe, Brandon, talk to us about, in fact, you actually said that it actually didn't have a big impact as what some may have thought on franchise development. You continue to sell franchises without an item 19. So maybe talk to us about that.
I think, that's something that we would work really closely with our brand presidents and myself, and when Robert was there at the time, Robert too, and my VPs of development. I want to preface this, right? Sales professionals are some of the most emotional people on the planet, right? So, you're changing my price, or you're taking out my item 19. I'm never gonna be able to sell. It's like, well, if you don't get to eat. So let's figure this out. But I think truly, it's the candidates are coming through. If you have your personas built correctly, right? If you have your team built with the standard of, look, here's what we're trying to accomplish. Here's the type of people we're bringing in. The presidents are on the same page as you. Item 19 is just kind of the icing on top. If someone doesn't have the trust or the brand built inside of their DNA, right? It's not their everyday, and they're pulling 30 different opportunities from a broker standpoint. It's important for the broker networks. We realized that over the last few years. But really and truly, it was just getting accurate information. Neighborly is crazy conservative when it comes to item 19s, and in a good way, right? If Grayson Brown, which is the general counsel, was on this call, I would say the same thing to him, right? In a good way, which is great. You got to protect yourself. You also got to protect the candidates. You got to make sure you set realistic expectations. But it's delivering accurate information. And if you take your item 19 out, or you don't have an item 19, the inference goes back on your franchisees, right? Because the candidate is going to call to get that information. They're going to call, and they're going to want to make sure that they can talk to as many people as they can. And I want to make sure, which is great. But if you have something to lean them back towards, or ask, hey, are you top 10%? Are you top 25% in the conversations? It just makes it a different conversation.
So that's an important point, right? I mean, really, and we all know this, if your franchisees aren't happy, that's way more important than an item 19, right? If your franchisees are validating, then you're going to see, obviously, a lot of your sales will continue. I got 4 questions uploaded in here, so I'm going to go ahead and jump on those right now. Mike Pierce asked the question, what led you to go from internal lead devs to external company for prospecting?
That's great. Mike, we wanted to make sure we were selling double Service Master. No, I'm teasing. We wanted to make sure that we could actively really and truly bring in the right people. So when you've got a multitude of brands, it's just bodies, right? You're in Waco, Texas, or you're in Dallas, Texas, or Neighborly at one time had 13 corporate offices prior to COVID that I would have to travel to at least once a month. It's really about bodies more than anything. And when you have someone leave, or you just have to make sure your training mechanism is on point. And so if you have a gap or a hole to fill, that's where we decided to go to like a ProNexis. Was hey, look, I have 19 brands to sell now in this platform. I don't have the bodies in my lead gen qualifier, or my lead gen qualifiers are doing LinkedIn and they're doing portal recounts or recalls. I still got to call through lead lists for my conversion team. It's a balance. And so when you can outsource for pennies, you might as well do it.
Yeah, you can flex up or flex down. It makes it quite a bit easier to move the flow. Heather McLeod had a question here for you. Hey, Brandon, can you share a little more about the reference to an intentional take with percent of broker sales versus others?
Yeah.
Also, hi, good to see you. I also vouched for how wonderful Brandon was for marketing team to work with.
100%. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Can you share a little more about the reference? Okay.
Heather and I are still in lockstep, even though it's been years. She was my VP of Fran Dev marketing. So, so to that question, Heather, I wanted to stay somewhere between 30 and 40% of my deals being brokers across all brands. When you bring on a new brand and they're 100% broker heavy, your goal should be how do we do both, right? How do we ramp this thing up? And kind of get to that metric, right? Using a Window Genie as an example, or some of the other brands, Real Property Management, 100% brokers when we brought them in, and it's really and truly getting that mix right. I think is a big deal. Also, too, a lot of really, really successful franchise development professionals are actually becoming brokers. So the pool is shrinking on finding the right candidates. You just have to know. I'm fortunate enough to be obviously in the industry for over a decade, so I know a lot of really successful people, but I wanted to be between that 30 and 40% broker was my target. Hopefully that answers that for you, Heather, and good to see you.
Awesome. Matt Kelton has a question here for you as well. At Neighborly, what kind of lead gen budget did you have annually on average per brand? And if you want to sell 12 franchises in a year, what kind of budget would you suggest?
Yeah, so I go back to stats that we've seen kind of in the industry. Scott, your team at Home Service Summit have done a great job on this. Franchise Development Leadership Conference publishes this too. Depending upon your brand, it's somewhere between $7,800 a sale, that's $7,800 a sale, and $12,000. So somewhere in that mix, right? Depending upon your dollar amount, depending upon your cap, depending upon your capital available. So if you want to sell 12 units and you need to be closer to the 12,000 mark, your budget should be 144,000. So we monitored that per brand. If I needed to sell 10 Mr. Rooters and I needed to sell 40 Grounds guys, you would move the scale up and down on that. And that metric is pretty standard across the group. That also, if you think through the cost, right? When I was just mentioning the broker percentages, that's where it's really helpful too.
Mm-hmm. And just on that note, if your franchise fee is $60,000 and you're spending $30,000 of that on a broker, I think of all, you can do the math here pretty quickly and see that $12,000 a deal is a lot less than $30,000 a deal. And so that if there may be an opportunity for some of you, you're selling 90% of your deals through brokers, you're missing out on a big opportunity to expand the brand using other methods as well. Karen Riker has a question here for you. Of the total sales numbers that you mentioned for a newbie versus a veteran, how many were a sale to an existing franchisee?
So at Neighborly, we consider new bodies, right? So for all the Fran Dev folks on the phone, it's new bodies. So an existing franchisee is just that. It's an existing franchisee. It is still 8 to 12 new heads, new bodies. Great question, Karen.
Yeah, that's really important, right? Because ultimately, it's going to happen. You're going to have new units added, new territories added, because franchisees who are happy will buy more, and that's all great. You want that expansion. I've always seen in home services, one of the biggest challenges to moving, 2 or 3 or 4 units to someone at the beginning of their careers that you're not going to get more royalties off. Ultimately, they're going to grow at a certain pace. Buying 2 or 3 territories does not do anything for a home services company. And it won't be until their 3rd, 4th year you start to see that stuff, grow as they have the right size. But we definitely want to be. You
also prevent the rookies from calling all the validators and asking them, "Oh, do you want to buy?" And you also prevent the poaching mechanism too of like, "Oh, I have someone looking at Austin, Texas, which is right next door to you. What do you think?" Now you've just made the whole system upset, and they may not even have that candidate. And it was a gator lead that came in. So it's just managing expectations. Is part of that too.
Yeah, I can't stress that enough. I mean, often, and for me, if I had a territory that had 3 territories with 1 person in it, and I had 2 more territories left, I would want those other 2 to be individuals buying. I don't want my one strong franchisee there to buy 2 more territories, because competition is good, and a great market, if you have a couple of franchisees in that one great market, will drive performance. And we saw that over time and time again over other brands. Okay, so SA has a question here for you. How important I'm not sure who SA is, if that's your name or if that's your initials, but thanks for the question. How important do you feel SEM, SEO specifically is in franchise development?
So search engine optimization is huge. I know Heather knows this, right? We talked about this a ton, but making sure, right, your consumer platform and your Fran Dev platform should be lockstep, right? You should still have franchise opportunities available, right? So your search engine optimization to get where you want to go, they should piggyback off of one another. It's extremely important, right? Think through how do you search for things, right? If you're looking for, and you go to Salt Lake City, Utah, and you say, I want the best Thai food restaurant, what are you going to do? You're going to Google it, right? So the same thing. Folks have a really rough day or a bad day, and they're sitting there going, HVAC franchise, they're an HVAC owner. Right? I want to be able to pop up there. I want to make sure that I ping up first, or in the top 3 at least, get the race running.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of speak to this as well, because we started 5-Star Painting in 2005 when the whole digital revolution was happening, and that's all I knew was digital marketing. And so almost 100% of our sales came from SEO at 5-Star Painting for years. Not one broker deal, I think, until our first broker deal was, I think, in 2009, maybe 2010. So 5 years into the business, everything came from online organic. Now, it's gotten way more competitive. It's a lot more difficult to rank the top. It's more sophisticated than ever before, but it is, and it should be a strategy for every franchise brand out there, because the reality is everyone's, in fact, if you're thinking about how brokers get their leads, most of it's organic. It's LinkedIn. It's ZipRecruiter. They're doing the same thing that you should be doing. They're just doing it better than you.
I remember flying out to see you and Chad with Robert, and us learning, like, how did you guys do your organic, and actually learning from you guys. I remember that, right? So,
yeah, it's been a minute for sure. Bajan Parvin's got a question. What resources do new franchisees gain access to from a marketing SEO perspective when joining a Neighborly?
It's a great question. Again, not at Neighborly anymore. So it may have shifted or changed, but it's going to be most of your basic information there. That would be one where I would say, hey, piggyback over to the Neighborly team and let them kind of help you with that, because I don't know the answer anymore, and things have changed.
Yeah, maybe Bijan, just to answer the question in terms of how this might impact franchise development. The reality is that if you're a home services brand, you need to have a solid digital footprint. About 60 to 75% of all the leads we generate comes from digital marketing. And so you can help franchise development if your franchise brand has a solid footprint and actually can generate leads for the franchisees. I have another question here on SEO, and maybe I'll answer this for you as well. What is your SEO budget per sale? Is this included in the $7,800 to $12,000 per sale budget?
That budget was the total, right? So that's total it take you to get a sale, right? Or it should take you to get a sale. If there's some brands that I've done some consulting with that are like $30,000 and $40,000 sale. They're just not, they just don't know what they're doing yet, or they're being sold kind of a bill of goods. So yes, that's the total number encompassing all of your lead generation. So great question. Minus your sales team's
whenever we talk about
salary, your center's salary, right? That's all payroll. That's not lead gen. So
correct.
I just want to clarify.
Yep. Yeah, that's just hard cost spend on some form of marketing, not on people, or soft costs. Okay, great. I want to make sure we touch on something that I think is really important because it's part of who Brandon is. We've got a few minutes left here. If there's any other questions, feel free to load them in. But how much does your faith play into how you work with people in your career? I mean, I'll just say this from some context here for those who are tuning in. I've spoken with a lot of franchise development people who have worked with Brandon over the years, and this has kept coming up, is how Brandon's faith has actually had a big impact on their own personal lives. And so, Brandon, I want you to just talk about how you integrate your own personal faith. I know you've written some books in this category as well. How do you pull those together?
Most recent book was called the Business Revival, getting what's inside of you, inside of your company. And I've worked with folks from all different faith backgrounds. I've worked with folks who are Muslims and Hindus and LDS and Christians, and it doesn't matter what your background is. So let me preface: my faith is very different, right? The Christianity that lives inside of me it comes out in conversations. It's never proselytizing, never going and telling someone they have to be a certain way, but it's just how I choose. It's how I choose to live. And folks see that and see there's something different. I can't truly tell you how many times in my career, in banking or here, where folks say, man, there is something different about you. Just because that's not a boast, that's not prideful. It's just truly the conversation of, look, this is how I choose to operate. And yes, we could get this deal done, but that's underhanded. Or no, that's not integrity. And we're going to be people of integrity. And hey, I actually want you to go home. It's 6 o'clock p.m. You've been at work till 6 o'clock every single day. And I need you to remember what your wife's face looks like. I need her to remember what your face looks like. I need you to remember what your husband looks like. And hey, by the way, I would bring my sons up to have lunch with me on Wednesdays. Everybody made a joke about it for a long time that, well, family is important to me. Faith and family, those integrate. Faith integrates into my office. Faith integrates into my business. And when you're open but not overt or not pompous about it, and you realize, wow, this is just a real guy who lives a life of integrity. I think the two things that I'm most proud of at my time at Neighborly is that I won the Live Rich Award twice. Not that I've sold all these franchises, not that I've sold a ton of things, not that I've helped people get to different places in their life. But the Live Rich Award, it's respect, integrity, customer focus, and having fun in the process. But it's chosen based on something that you did when no one was around. And so there were a couple times in my career where folks just in the community would see me do something and felt upon themselves to either write Dina or write Doyle James, the president of AirServe at the time, and say, hey, this is the kind of man that you have. And the other thing I say that I get choked up with is, I want my sons, when people ask my sons, what do Haire men do? That's our last name, is we love God, we love people, and we change the world. That's it. You can ask my 4-year-old, what do we do? And it's that simple. It is that simple. When you boil it down, that's all there is to it. And when you live intentionally, everything around you, including the people that report to you, including the people that you report to, will change.
That's a great note to end on. I think I personal reminder as well, but living authentically in whatever you are and who you are, bringing that to every element of your life. Who you are at business, at work, should be the same person you are at home or at church or at your soccer game, whether you're on the field or you're off the field coaching, or you're yelling at your kids or you're yelling at the kids' coach. You got to be that same person throughout. So it's a nice reminder, and I think that we've seen that as you do that, the kind of success you can achieve in any element in your life. So thank you, Brandon, for everything you shared with us today. Appreciate everyone for attending and the questions, and we will see you
Thanks
next
for having
month.
me.